town within Nyeri County. Let's now go to Mombasa County, where we want to listen in as former Mombasa Senator Hassan Omar testifies in a case against the declaration of current Governor Hassan Joho as the winner of the August 8th poll. Let's listen in. This should be the Mombasa law courts, I believe.
In the face of those charges, is there anywhere that it discloses that those alleged offenses and there is the outcome of those charges is not included in the affidavit? We did that there. Is there anywhere on the face of those charges that disclose that these charges are in respect of the election of Governor Mombasa County?
If you look at page 200, at least one, but if we go to the statement, the particulars of the offense between 20th June 2017, 200, and 6th July 2017 at Likoni Ferry area within Mombasa County. Disseminated information that page 200 Wamara mchague Sultan na chaguo lake.
Well, we apologize. We're not getting very clear sound signal from that courtroom. But that's a little bit about what is happening. Expect more updates with what exactly transpired there in our subsequent bulletins. Now, let's take a look at the big story of the day. And we begin that by looking at a report that was done yesterday in our 9 o'clock news. Now, a day to his inauguration for a second and final term, President Kenyatta has reached out to the opposition to join him in uniting and building the nation. Kenyatta, who spoke at a church service in Huruma, Nairobi yesterday, said his election victory was for all Kenyans and urged leaders to shun divisive politics. Meanwhile, the Assumption of Office Committee was finalizing preparations for the swearing-in ceremony yesterday at Kasarani, Nairobi. Jackie Maribe gives us those details.
Kneeling down in prayer, the president and his deputy would yet again turn to prayer 2 days before their swearing-in ceremony at Kasarani on Tuesday. In their second joint public appearance after the Supreme Court validated their election victory, they would join a faithful at the Redeemed Gospel Church in Huruma.
We made a covenant with God that when He gives us victory, glory and honor shall go back to Him. And that is why we have come here to submit to God.
Your Excellency, I want to thank you for teaching us prayer. This nation prays today because you have taught us prayer. Na asante kanisa kwa maombi ambayo tumezidi kuombea nchi yetu, tutazidi kuomba na Mungu atatufanyia mema.
The president using this opportunity to talk about his swearing-in ceremony.
Ya kwamba jukumu langu la kwanza ni amani kwa wananchi wote. Ya pili ni umoja ya Wakenya iwe msingi ya maendeleo yale ambayo tunatafuta.
He would reiterate his call to the political class to unify the country through their leadership devoid of party affiliation.
Na waomba hata hawa ambao tulishindana na wao, hakuna haja sasa ya kusumbua mwananchi. Mwananchi ametimiza yake. Sisi tuje sasa tukae na tupange yale ambaye tunataka kutendea wa Kenya. And let us work out those differences. Let us work out how we differently plan our different agendas without affecting the daily lives of the people. Because all the people want is peace. What they want is security. What they want is jobs. What they want is health. What they want is good education for their children. What they want to know is that they can retire in peace in their own nation, irregardless of where they come from. It is for us to provide that for them.
That all of us as the people of Kenya will refuse hate and resist ethnicity and reject division so that we can live together as one people, the great people of one nation called Kenya.
Na ningependa kuambia wajumbe wa NASA wa Nairobi na wa Kenya Ma-MCA wa NASA wa Nairobi na pia wa Kenya, njooni sasa tufanye kazi pamoja. Tuambie wananchi wetu ni njia gani tutasaidia vijana wetu wapate kazi. Vile kina mama wetu watafanya biashara. Vile watu wetu wa Nairobi watapata afya ya bure. Si ni kweli? Because wale walituchagua bado ni wale wananchi ambao wamewachagua. It is time for us to move forward to develop this country.
Diversity, the head of state says, should be embraced and celebrated, not tolerated and abused for political or personal gain.
Kuna haja ya Kenya kuwa na umoja na kuwa na amani.
So that we can all, as the people of Kenya, continue to build the bridges of friendship, of unity, of togetherness and brotherhood, because that's the will of God for our nation. And
we have a lot to be proud of as a people because of that rich culture of diversity, which unfortunately we as politicians have tended to abuse for personal rather than national gain.
At Kasarani, preparations for the inauguration ceremony were in their final stages as the country prepares to receive foreign dignitaries and invited heads of state and government as the president takes oath for his second and final term in office.
Well, thank you, Jackie Maribe, for that report, showing us pictures from Kasarani last night. Let's now show you fresh live images from the Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani, where we know that the judiciary has planned a full rehearsal when it comes to the administration of the presidential oath of office. And we can see rehearsals still ongoing. And Kaikai Kissinger, who can actually come in at this moment, you had mentioned how intense the last couple of days before an inauguration like the one you took part in 2013 were. Maybe just help us compare and contrast a bit about what you went through last time, that's in 2013, and what we're seeing on our screen right now.
What normally happens is that once the committee that we talked about in the morning, Office of the Assumption Committee, is formed, then they swing into action immediately. So from Monday, when the Supreme Court made the decision, the committee was already sitting into position. And one of the first things they were to do is to come up with the budgetary allocation, and I'm sure they come up with the budgetary allocation, the figures we are talking about. Thereafter, then there has to be a visit at the stadium. And I can see a lot of improvement in the stadium right now, a lot of refurbishments that have taken place. I don't know whether it's coinciding with this function or it has taken place before, because this is not the way it was looking like in 2013. Then there's a thorough security checkup of the entire stadium by the security agents of the country.
Okay.
We'll have to completely check and ensure that everything is secure. Then the rehearsals begin, and then the appointment and the hiring of service providers is also done within a very short period of time. And of course, the judiciary takes a center stage where they will have their own dice in terms of swearing in the president. And of course, there's a military function to it. So there are two functions in one. The military function, as you can see, right now the military are doing their normal rehearsals and parades because they will take a critical role.
Yes.
And the judiciary also, which does its own part. So I'm very sure that the judiciary is represented there because it's also part of the committee that is actually preparing the swearing-in ceremony.
So do you think someone of the caliber of the Chief Justice would need to be here today, because I guess it's the final rehearsal?
No.
Not necessarily?
No, not necessarily. What normally happens is that this is the function of the administration. So basically the Chief Registrar is taking a central role in terms of ensuring that things are up to speed, but then of course with the regular updates to the Chief Justice, telling the Chief Justice the levels of preparedness that they have done. Now in our time, I think the former Chief Justice came to visit a day before.
Oh, okay.
A day before the inauguration.
Just to see what the layout looks like.
How the layout looks, because he has to be taken through. It's a kind of a rehearsal for him, because they have to do the rehearsal. So it's most likely that maybe the Chief Justice will go there in the evening to be taken through. If not, he will be taken through from his offices of exactly what he's supposed to do. Okay. So it all depends with the Chief Justice.
Okay. Joy, you can come in as well. Just your thoughts even as we continue to look at what is happening in Kasarani. And before I come to you, Joy, maybe Wilkista now is ready. If she is, Wilkista Nyabua, still good morning. Just let us know what's been happening in Kasarani since I guess this is the last day by which rehearsal can happen. Walk us through what's been happening over the last couple of hours there.
Good morning, Wahiga. We are actually at the Kasarani Stadium, and preparations are underway for the inauguration of President Uhuru Kenyatta tomorrow. And actually what is taking place here are rehearsals, full rehearsals ahead of the inauguration. And perhaps you can hear a little bit of that. You can also see the troops right in the middle of the stadium, and also the master of ceremonies just running through his lines ahead of that tomorrow. We do know that the ceremony is expected to begin by 10 a.m. and as per the constitution, the president should have been sworn in by 2 p.m. and we have just seen our security officers here. Also just around here is the Assumption of Office Committee. They have also just come to make sure that everything is in order ahead of the ceremony tomorrow. So just going through the steps, ensuring that everything is in place, just trying to see if there's anything that needs to be amended. We're also seeing just a number of people here arranging seats, security taking their places and preparing for this tomorrow. Also on the roads, as we were headed here, we also saw that a number of flags had already been put on the road leading to the stadium. We are informed that these are the flags from the countries that will be represented here tomorrow during the inauguration. So we would say really that everything seems to be on course so far. We do expect to see the judiciary. They are expected here, of representatives from the judiciary also coming, everybody just seeking to know what exactly they're supposed to be doing tomorrow and to be ready and prepared to play their role tomorrow. So we will just be sitting through the full rehearsal and then we will be able to give you further updates as matters continue to unfold. Wahiga Maura.
Okay, well, Kista, are you able to let us know what time the program is expected to run until, and also talk to us a little bit about the security features outside the stadium? What did you see as you made your way to that location? Okay, well, Kista, if you haven't heard me, can you hear me now? I want to get some... Okay, you can hear me now. Two things very quickly. How long do you expect the rehearsal to run for or to run until? That's my first question. And secondly, talk to us about the security features around, or the security setup around the stadium. What did you see as you made your way there?
Well, Wahiga, if I can hear you clearly, you have asked about the security setup. We have seen the security checks were very rigorous, and anybody who did not have any business being in the stadium today was not allowed in. Checks of vehicles, and we were actually asked to come out of our vehicles so that the vehicle could be searched, as well as just the usual preparations, I would say, searching through our bags and ensuring that we're not bringing in anything that could be harmful. So we do expect this also to be replicated tomorrow. Very tight security around the podium where the ceremony will take place, and we are also seeing a lot of security officers milling around. So we would say it is under very, very tight security, and we expect it to get tighter still tomorrow. Wahiga?
Yes, and the earlier question that I also asked you, do you know what the rest of the rehearsal program looks like and what time it will run until?
Well, Wahiga, we haven't seen the program yet for tomorrow, but we do know it is expected to run between 10 and 2. So we do expect that the rehearsals will take roughly about this time, although of course they will not be running through every single thing. So the rehearsals may take a bit less time, just everyone ensuring that they are there, that they know their place and what time they're supposed to come in today, so that tomorrow they know where they're supposed to be and everything can run smoothly. So we do expect that the rehearsals will definitely be shorter, but tomorrow it would be looking at a program of starting from 10 to around 2 in the afternoon.
Thank you, Wakista, for that update. We continue to monitor the situation now at the Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani. Those are the images that we shall now keep on the screen, even as I engage my guests here in studio. Joy, I was coming to you. Tomorrow, ideally, all focus should be on what is happening there. But if the National Super Alliance continue with their plan, it probably will not be. Kenyans will be on one hand monitoring what's happening at Kasarani, but on the other hand also asking what is happening at the Jacaranda grounds. Maybe we can talk a bit about as conflict looming is what some have called it. And I begin by asking you, in the law, do the police have any provisions to stop the National Super Alliance from holding the prayers that they say that they are holding tomorrow, even though we know it is a big day for the nation, judging by just what will be happening at Kasarani?
Well, the reasons that have been fronted so far have been more to do with security and the inconvenience of trying to man both occasions at the same time, which is what I've had. So if, for example, the National Super Alliance decided to hold their meeting on Wednesday rather than Tuesday, I think there would have been much less objection to it than the fact that it is happening on the same day as the inauguration. So all the heads of states who are expected and all the people who are coming in, you'd expect the security would be a lot more heightened than before. And all the roads in that general area and the general area around the airport would be more heavily secured than it would ordinarily be. So I don't think there's a conflict in terms of the magnitude of the events, because the inauguration, I mean, is just out of the charts. It's the event of the day tomorrow. But I think it's just because it will be, how do I put it, inconvenient for the security forces to deal with both occasions at once. So it would be easier for them to say, you know what, shut this one down, let's deal with this one, and then we can deal with this one another day.
Although some would say that following the law is sometimes not always a convenient process. Jemima, let me come to you as well. We've seen President Uhuru Kenyatta, we've just watched that story, extending or making the gesture of inviting Mr. Odinga. He has invited the other presidential candidates to the inauguration as well. Could this be seen as an attempt to maybe diffuse the situation that many are foreseeing could happen tomorrow? The fact that all attention may be taken away from Kasarani to what is happening should the opposition carry on with their rally. And as some are saying, is it too late? The opposition has been saying, let's have dialogue, let's talk, let's do this in the run-up to the election. Jubilee said, no, let's do the election first, and then we can talk later. But now we are seeing it's now the other side where Jubilee are saying, let's talk. But the opposition are saying, when we wanted to talk, you are not interested. Your take on a day that will definitely go down in the history books, that is tomorrow.
Well, I must start by, for me, it's a positive gesture on part of the president to send an invite to the opposition to attend the inauguration. Remember, it's a public event now under our constitution. It's even been declared a public holiday. And for all purposes, for me, I would rather see it from the positive side, that the president recognizes the opposition leader and his position, even in terms of checking the government, and the role the opposition plays. Whether or not it's from the look of things, whether it's a genuine gesture politically and whether the opposition would see it that way. Of course, we have seen the opposition has already taken the position that they do not recognize the president. They have said so on TV, I heard it. They had even at one point come up with the idea of swearing in the Honorable Raila also as a president. Of course, we have seen Honorable Raila reject such gestures. For me, it's not late in the day, because it was also very difficult for the president to have a meaningful dialogue before the elections were held and before he himself got any position in which he would then be saying, I as the president now welcome you to dialogue. For me, I think this is the right time for the president to reach out to the opposition, and the opposition should also, for the sake of the country, maybe also listen to what the president is saying, give it a chance and see how it goes.
They're saying he did not listen before the election. Why should they listen to him now? Ruth, you know, how do we get out of this situation where tomorrow some say, you know, it could go, it could either be a day that Kenyans will remember for the positive, for the right reasons, or it could be another dark day in the nation, depending on how the police, NASA, etc. handle things around the Jacaranda ground function. Your take?
I think right now the president faces at the moment right now, he faces it's a critical situation of trying to consolidate a very fragile, you know, transition. I would call it fragile because of the long-standing political differences between these two camps and the hard stances that these two parties have taken. one could choose to look at it from a negative point of view, in the sense that, you know, expect violence, expect that there's going to be a lot of running battles. But then again, we could choose to, as a country, and not just look at it, but embrace it from a point of view of that this is democracy. It's the true face of democracy, that in a democracy, you cannot force people to share a similar political view, you know, as to yours. So if one side of the country feels that, oh, we want to go and swear in Uhuru Kenyatta, let them do so. If another side of the country feels that on that particular day we need to go and honor persons who died in the course of our political struggle, then allow them to do so. We have seen situations in America where, when Donald Trump was being sworn in, we had a whole section of the country that was, you know, rioting and going out there and expressing their, not necessarily rioting, but going out there and expressing their displeasure with the fact that he was being sworn in. And it is the true face of democracy that there will always be two parties or even more that do not agree with your view. So allowing them to exercise that right to engage politically, that right to express their views in a peaceful manner, is the way to go. And you see, unfortunately, we are a country that seems to be very afraid of the power of the opposition, and therefore, the moment the opposition says we are going to hold a rally, even if there is not going to be any case of violence, then the police force is released upon them, and it all turns chaotic. What was meant to be peaceful turns chaotic. So I think that we should just embrace both parties. Let them do their thing. Let NASA do their thing. It is their right to engage politically. And I don't think that political rights have a limit, in terms of, we really don't have a section of the Constitution that says that on the day the president is being sworn in, that is all that shall happen on that particular day. If people feel that that is a holiday and we have our own political affiliations, let us engage the way we wish to, and the country will move forward.
They should go ahead.
Yeah.
Kai Kissinger, should the police allow NASA to hold their rally and provide security, which has been their prayer?
You know, one of the difficult things that we find ourselves in as a country is that the swearing-in ceremony is a constitutional requirement. A constitutional requirement in the sense that it's actually put in the Constitution when a president-elect should be sworn in. And that comes with a lot of responsibility to the government. And one of the responsibilities of the government is to actually provide security for that swearing-in ceremony. Remember, you're having all manner of visitors all over the world and sitting presidents coming in. So I think that the difficulty that the police finds themselves in, I don't know whether they have given NASA the permission to do so, but I think, or whether NASA has informed them, and if NASA has informed them, whether the police have agreed to provide them security. Because
we saw a notice by Sifuna's law firm over the weekend. We've also seen comments by Nairobi County Commander Japheth Kome. So for now, we can assume NASA have written to the relevant authorities, and the county commander for Nairobi, at least from where he stands, there is no rally tomorrow,
and this is
prayer rally tomorrow.
Exactly. So I will assume, therefore, that the police are not going to allow it for purposes of this argument. Because this is the logistical nightmare that the police will find themselves in. Because you are supposed to be guarding dignitaries coming in, because this is a constitutional requirement, which is in the Constitution. But at the same time, you are supposed to provide security to the locals, because the police are ideally supposed to provide security to the NASA supporters going all the way to Jacaranda. Remember that already there's a published list of roads that will be closed already. So already that becomes the logistical challenge or nightmare. So in my view, as much as NASA will want to push this agenda, it will have been just prudent for them to say, okay, fine, let's see the swearing-in ceremony. We've been invited, we will not go, but let's sit back home and relax. Then after that, we will go ahead and do what we have to do. But remember, their agenda is that they are pushing that they want to have a memorial for the people who died during the skirmishes, which is a good agenda in my view, but I think the timing is where the problem might come in. So I see a little bit of difficulties tomorrow if NASA insists going ahead with their memorial service.
Okay, Joy, I want to paint for you a picture that various pundits have been discussing. Picture this: NASA stick to their guns, rally will take place tomorrow, or at least they'll attempt to have it. Police also maintain the script there, declare it illegal, come out with water cannons, come out with tear gas launchers, etc. Local international media will be here tomorrow with all the big cameras to record all that's happening. Will this not put the government in a worse predicament, quote unquote, than it would have if they had allowed the rallies to go on peacefully? Because right now the images that especially international media will broadcast are of a day of tear gas and chaos, etc. Your take again, because it almost looks like from a NASA perspective it's about the headlines, then that confrontation by police will work in their favor.
And on that score, I actually agree with you. If I was Commissioner Kome, I tell them, you know what, you go ahead, but but because my police officers will be held up on other duties, expect minimal to no policemen at your function, because right now, imagine almost all the police officers who are on commission, even the ones who are on leave, must have been assigned duty somewhere.
Even from other counties, they have been, you know, some have been recalled to the city.
There will be very few people there to be able to police. I tell them, look, go ahead, but don't expect any security from us, because today is an inopportune day. For example, I would have been, if I was an NASA strategist, I would have maybe decided, you know what, let's put this in a separate location where we don't need all this, like in Kisumu, or maybe even not a very far away county. Let's go to Nakuru, you know, somewhere where the excuse of there's inauguration inconveniences cannot
would not work.
But like you said, if it is for purposes of a headline or for purposes of sensationalization, then a heavy police presence or a violent rebuttal would be exactly what the international media would be wanting to highlight on. Because for them, they've been waiting for the country to go up in flames for the whole year. And Kenya has not given them that. So they would be looking for something to help them also to spice up the occasion. But I thank the opposition as well, because in choosing to have a prayer meeting, at least you can see they're trying to make it look like this is a peaceful gathering. There is no need for government panic. And I wish the government would also just take you and say, you know what, let's for once take them at their word that this is going to be a peaceful. And if it's otherwise, then next time you can tell them, look, we tried to hold you at your word and you did not prove yourself true.
Okay.
So the scenario you're painting would be best case scenario if you're looking to grab a headline. Yes, on that score we are.
Okay. Jemima, I'll give you a chance to respond if you want to, but I also want to ask you, we can assume that after the declaration of the win of President Uhuru Kenyatta after the August 8th poll, that a speech had already started being drafted by his speechwriters. We can assume that that speech was then put on hold after the Maraga-led bench judgment that led us back to another election as well. What do you hope to see in the speech that the president will read tomorrow? What are some of the messages, key messages that you hope will come out of that speech? Because if that speech is happening at the same time as a memorial in another part of the city, then definitely there'll be a lot of pressure on his part to be able to take everything into consideration before the eyes of the world.
Well, it is expected that the president's speech will address his oath of allegiance and his oath of execution. Basically, the oath of allegiance will be like that he is committed to the Republic of Kenya. He is committed to upholding the Constitution. So his allegiance to the Republic and his allegiance to the Constitution, he has to highlight that in his speech, as much as he took the oaths separately. And of course, the oath of execution would require him to just remind that Kenyans that he will be committed to his duty, that he will carry out his mandate, and he will treat all Kenyans equally, and that more than ever before, and I've heard him say that he is committed to uniting Kenyans. So I expect the issue of uniting Kenyans to take a greater part of his speech, how he actually intends to do that, considering where we are as a country. Of course, now, as on the issue of the parallel rally, the opposition now is thrown into civil disobedience. That's for me what I take from them. Their agenda is civil disobedience to make president's term really difficult. That is their agenda. And so the president, in his speech, should come out and show Kenyans that he genuinely desires to be a president of all Kenyans, including the opposition strongholds, which are quite vast. And this will help to ease the tensions in the country, even as he takes over. And more than ever, he must convince Kenyans that he is not only a Jubilee president. Even Kenyans are watching carefully, even as he moves to compose the cabinet. Where will he get these people from? He should reach out to the opposition zones, so that Kenyans can feel that he genuinely cares. It's not an issue of just saying it in his speeches. Whatever he does from now in terms of composing his cabinet, in terms of even on how resources are distributed, will determine whether or not Kenya becomes a united country.
You've actually preempted my next question, which I was bringing to Ruth.
Yes.
NASA supporters, in some quarters have said that it doesn't matter what the president will say tomorrow. Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
They have routinely called for the president to sit down with NASA to discuss how an election would have taken place. He did not sit down with them to discuss that. So for them, it doesn't matter what he says tomorrow because his actions have not matched, what he has said in the past from where they stand. Your take on whether a speech tomorrow, and this is a question I'd posed to this panel earlier on, can really make a difference in changing the hearts and minds of those who may not support the president, or whether it's more of let's wait and see whether you'll actually do those things before we believe you. Your take?
We are at a situation whereby Jubilee leaders and the president is now calling for dialogue with the NASA opposition leader. And yet, the whole purpose of a dialogue is to resolve certain interests and to set clear certain positions that have been taken. And at the time when NASA supporters felt it was necessary to have dialogue, was for them the question, the whole point of dialogue should have been the question of electoral justice. And the president maintained the position that he shall only have a dialogue as to what is the way forward for the country after having been elected, after elections are done and a winner is declared and the country now needs to move forward. So right now, the whole conversation about whether this speech is going to change anything for NASA supporters, and I don't think it should just be viewed in terms of for the NASA supporters, but for the country as a whole. How important will this speech be? Will it be a speech that he comes and commits himself and says how he's going to move the country forward, he's going to embrace national unity, he's going to ensure that there's the whole patriotism is restored and our national identity is restored, and then days later we get to see leaders, especially from his camp, still propagating, the political division amongst them or not. Will this speech at the end of 5 years be a measure? Can we rely on his words at the end of his 5-year term and say that, look, when the president spoke about resolving long-standing political, social, and economic grievances, he actually kept his word, So I think, personally, from where I stand, a speech will not change anything if actions that follow the speech don't match with the words said, it will not change anything at all. Okay. If, let's say, for instance, during his speech, he says, now we are going to ensure that institutions, independent institutions that are meant to ensure that the livelihood of, Kenyans, basically, let's say, for instance, if he says, I'm going to reform the police force, and then days later we still see, targeted killings of opposition supporters or excessive use of police force, then his words will lose meaning. I truly hope that whatever speech he shall make, he shall accompany the same with words, because this is his second term. If he is truly intent on leaving a legacy, then he should be stuck on whatever he says tomorrow. Okay,
Kalika, I know you want to respond to that, but I can also ask you, we've had NASA legislators saying they'll not participate in the vetting of Uhuru's nominees to the cabinet. Does that then begin to tell us that the political situation we are in will drag on for a very long time, that it's not over after tomorrow?
Before I answer that part, I need to add something to what my colleagues have said. I think if you study the body language and if you study the dynamics that His Excellency Uhuru has been doing since the repeat election, there are some characters that you carry along with you. One of them is that President Uhuru is a former student of Daniel Arap Moi, the former president. And what you saw is a very clever move by President Uhuru, moving towards the former retired President Moi in terms of having discussions. No one knows what discussions they had, but I can bet that some of the discussions were that how will you then navigate these challenges that we are facing, which is of a political nature, but not of a legal nature. So you saw that happening. Number two, he is also a student of former President Mwai Kibaki. And you saw during the funeral of the late Governor Nyeri, Honorable Kibaki was there and Honorable Uhuru was there. So there are some lessons that these former heads of states must be passing over to the current head of state in terms of how do you navigate the political terrain that you are in. Now, so you cannot take those two former heads of state for granted in terms of giving words of wisdom to His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta. Because Moi, former retired President Moi, was in a certain political dynamics. You remember during the merger of KANU and LDP. Now, he navigated through that. Now, you remember what happened with the President Mwai Kibaki when he came to power and the NAC regime, and he navigated through these challenges that led to dialogues and all this. So I think there are some political lessons that His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta is learning from them. So don't take it for granted. Number 3, having said that, number 3, look at the body language and the speeches he has been doing. Look at what he did in church yesterday. When he came to church, he said some things that most likely will end up addressing what we are talking about in terms of his speech. He talked about issues of humility, he talked about issues of peace, he talked about issues of harmony, and also talked about issues of let's resist ethnicity, negative ethnicity. So some of these things are a certain hint or the direction of where he's going. And when you look at the agenda of Jubilee, he's already talked about 3 agendas of Jubilee in yesterday's speech of the 2017, in terms of, for example, peace and sustainability. He's talking about them. So I see a kind of him navigating extremely well in terms of the political dynamics that are facing him. Remember, this is not the first time this country, Kenya, is facing this issue of dialogue. We've been there before. So he knows what to do and is being guided very well, and I think he will be able to do it very well.
Okay.
Now, coming to your second question. Your second question is about the issues of NASA refusing to participate in vetting the nominees.
Yes.
Now, one, it is the entire requirement or his entire prerogative of the president and his deputy to appoint the cabinet. That's a fact, because they are formed government, and that's just how law it goes. Now, nothing stops the president to appoint any cabinet nominee from the opposition, because these are cabinet nominees, and initially we moved away and said we want to appoint cabinet nominees because the cabinet must be representative of the country. Now, once they appoint, let's say, a cabinet nominee from the NASA region, it will be interesting to see whether NASA people will say, hey, don't go join the cabinet because we are opposing the president.
It will also be interesting to see how that nominee responds.
It will be very interesting to see
to
what
that invitation.
But remember, exactly, but remember, it is a requirement of a cabinet or a formation of a cabinet to be inclusive. And he has been talking about inclusivity. Even yesterday's speech in church, he talked about inclusivity. So it will be very interesting to see what happens there. But by and large,
yes,
they will be nominated, they will be taken to parliament, they will be vetted, and the
depending
rest,
on whoever is there.
Exactly. And the rest now becomes moot.
Okay, okay. I know our time is almost up, and we need to take a look at some stories on the international front that I'll be telling you about shortly. Let me get some closing comments or parting shots here from my guest in studio. I can give you each a chance to respond a bit to what Kaikai Kissinger had to say, as you also tell us, what do you hope will be the priorities, the highest priorities of President Uhuru Kenyatta in his second and last term? Joy, let me start with you.
You know, we've been fixated with Honorable Uhuru and Honorable Raila for basically the whole of this year. And we have forgotten that at the center of all these things is the Kenyan people. What do we deserve as the Kenyan people? We deserve leaders that we have elected to do that which we've elected them. Like, for example, with Parliament, sometimes I get very vexed when I hear parliamentarians saying, we will do this, we will not do this. Because at the end of the day, even if they do not participate, you'll find that the processes of Parliament will still proceed. And when you look at the Hansard, it will look like these things are proceeding without any input or any contrary opinion. And that is not good for this nation. We need to have people who are pragmatic, because once they get into Parliament, they're one unit now. It's no longer like before, where you are still an appendage of the executive. Now Parliament ought to stand by itself. Now, what I hope for the president to do with the country moving forward, one thing that I would really, really hope is that even if we see no more SGR being constructed or no more roads being constructed, we have to get to a place where there's national building and peace building across the regions. Because what we have right now is a situation that is not tenable for this nation. We cannot have this level of hate going on, because we have 5 years before the next elections. And in that 5 years, if we are still in this current impasse, even development is going to suffer. We have seen, for example, the last few days with the demonstrations, the businessmen, even in Nyeri, were saying, we are hoping now with the inauguration, business is going to come up again. We need to get to a place where some normality returns. And that's why I keep saying the politicians have to put on their big boy pants and do politics within the confines of the law and leave the citizens out of this, so that the Kenyan people can do what we are supposed to do, which is build the economy. It's people who create jobs, it's people who move the country forward, so that at the end of the 5 years when you come back, there's actually people to be governed. Okay. Because at the end of the day, the way we are carrying on right now, we are destroying the very people we are purporting to be interested in leading.
Okay.
And for me, that's it. The politicians have to man up and do what we have elected them to do.
You put it in a very interesting way. Put on their big boy or big girl pants. Again,
Yes.
depending on which way you look at it. Jemima, your take, utmost priority for the Uhuru administration, second and last term, and of course this is all leading to his legacy, what he'll be remembered for. What would you advise him and his administration?
Well, you have just stated that the president needs to create his legacy. As the fourth president of this country, he needs to create his legacy. And this is the only time he can do it. He inherited a country which was quite united and a country which was peaceful. Kenyans who had freedoms. We never had so much violence from the police towards the citizens. So that is what he inherited. A fairly good economy, one would say that. So I would expect the president to embark on reviving the economy. I'm happy I've seen he has formed a committee on economic issues. I would expect him to put more emphasis on the economy. We have a huge public debt. I expect him to put in measures, fiscal measures, to at least see how to reduce this huge public debt, because we are in trouble with such a huge debt. What are we passing to the next generation? And he should also be careful not to pass such a huge debt to the next president,
Be too heavy
because that would be
yeah.
his legacy. He passed a huge debt to the next president. So I expect him to put in some financial discipline, some economic measures to revive the industries, to revive the economy, cut down on the wages, on the national wage expenditure, which I think has contributed to what we have now. For myself, I don't really expect major constructions in terms of whether we'll have another railway construction or otherwise. But for me, what I look forward is for the president putting in some real tangible economic measures.
Okay.
I would also expect to see more development of resources
To the counties.
to the counties, so that we can now start to reduce the pressure on the presidency. And this will also appease the opposition zones, because they have their own devolved government. That would really help. And of course, another thing is uniting the country.
Okay.
That is another issue he needs to deal with.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth.
Well, my final remarks are that we exist in a country that has very staunch supporters of two political divides, but yet we are now found in a situation where we must have one government. I think if there is one thing I would expect the president to do is to raise the bar on institutions that are meant to ensure that, you know, society is moving forward, to raise the bar in terms of the credibility of these institutions, the execution of the functions of these institutions, to begin to adopt a system of meritocracy, especially from the word go, because I know after being sworn in, we expect to have a list of cabinet secretaries, you know, rolling out. We need to see this list selected, of the person selected on the basis of meritocracy, because we need to raise the bar of integrity in this country. And the other legacy that we expect him to leave, because this is his last term, is how united shall the people be after such a divisive, you know, period of politics and a season of political confrontations and differences. How united shall the people be? So we expect to see, personally expect to see what steps he shall take to ensure that, you know, the grievances that are shared by not just opposition supporters, but by Kenyans in general are resolved. You know, long-standing social political grievances of certain parts of Kenya feeling as if they have been excluded from government operations, from the share of the national cake. So personally, I hope to see what he shall do around that. But of great importance is to resolve the grievances that are most immediate right now, the political grievances that are most immediate.
Deal with them with a sense of urgency. I want to not to give Kai Kissinger a chance to wind up, but rather to help us just take a look at what's happening right now at the Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani, and Amadi there. Going through rehearsals, we can expect that's what's going on right now,
yes,
Kai?
Yes, that's normal. It's a rehearsal, and I'm sure she's exactly taking them through in terms of what will happen on the judiciary side of swearing in the president tomorrow. So she's rehearsing, and you can see the military is also there in terms of what role the military will do. So basically what she's doing is taking them through the judicial function of the ceremony. So that's expected. I will expect probably that in the afternoon, maybe the Chief Justice could also go there to see exactly how it will happen. If not, of course, she will brief the CJ of what happens. Now, going back to your last question in terms of the things that I'll expect to see, I have summarized 7 things that I expect to come out clear in terms of the next 5 years.
7 things.
7 things.
Briefly.
And please. I'll just mention them. How to unpack them is actually the agenda of the Jubilee Party. One is the issue of infrastructure. Clarify and enhance infrastructure in this country. If more railways are to be built, go ahead and do it. Number 2.
With what money?
Number 2. Number 2.
Okay.
Number 2.
Okay.
The issue of education. We've seen a very good work done by the cabinet sector of education. Free primary education has been introduced in the last 5 years. We are going into this one. Free secondary education must be improved, must be done or enhanced. Look at the textbook things that has come up. We expect now completely consolidating the issues on education sector. 3, youth. We want to see the participation or involvement of youth, and this will come out very clearly in the nomination of the cabinet secretaries. We need to see how the youth are going to be represented. Remember, the youth is below the age of 35 years. 4, the issues of food security. We've had challenges in terms of food security in this country, poor rains and all this. How is the government going to ensure that food security is actually enhanced? Number 5, the health of the nation. The health of the nation. Remember some of the devolution issues. Health never devolved. So how are we going to ensure that we've had strikes of nurses, strikes of doctors, we've had challenges of the health sector. How are we going to enhance this as we go in the next 5 years? And the 7th one is the issue of realignment of the cabinet. We want to ask ourselves, when the cabinet is being formed, how is it going to be realigned? Is it going to be a URP-TNE into Jubilee, or is it going to consolidate and ensure that the entire cabinet is coming across the whole nation, and the country is then inclusive in terms of representation? And finally, we must continue talking about issues of peace, sustainability, and security in the country. How now Jubilee will unpack all those is really something for Kenyans to look at. So those are the 7 things that I, as Kakai Kissinger, will want to see the next government doing. Okay, I think you've summarized them quite well, and I think that on that note, that is how we wind up this discussion. Thank you so much, Joy Mdivo, Jemima Kelly, Ruth Ambogo, and Kakai Kissinger for finding time to be here with us and to just share your wish list, even as the president prepares to be sworn in tomorrow, rather, and also to give his speech and thereafter to lead the country for the next 5 years as per the Constitution. And thank you to everyone who's been watching this program as well. Our time is up. I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening on the global stage. Maybe let me just touch on 1 or 2 incidents. Pope Francis, he has departed the Vatican. He's headed to Myanmar. He's actually there on his first papal visit to the country that this year has been widely accused of ethnic cleansing. Now, focus will be on whether he'll use the term Rohingya to describe the country's Muslim minority. Myanmar officials strongly reject the term, raising concerns it could spark some potential violence if he does. He is scheduled to meet Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi and the head of the country's military. The Pope will then visit Bangladesh and meet a small group of refugees there in a symbolic gesture. Now, this 80-year-old Pope has been known for his liberal views and willingness to denounce global injustice. Well, that's how we wrap up this broadcast. You have been watching Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV. My name is Wahiga Mwaura. We take a quick break now. Salim Swale is on standby to take you to the Kiswahili section of this broadcast up until 1 o'clock. Then I'll be back with the 1 o'clock news. Many thanks indeed for finding time to be here with us. We take a short break now.